Good afternoon, dear PEMPAL Internal Audit Community of Practice members, speakers, and guests. My name is Armand Vatyan, and I am PEMPAL Program Leader and Internal Audit Community of Practice Coordinator at the World Bank Governance Global Practice. It is my pleasure to welcome you to our second IACOP Smart Interactive Talk, as we call it, SIT. The focus of this SIT will be on the key performance indicators for internal audit activity, collecting and analyzing the qualitative and quantitative data. We are discussing those which are relevant primarily in the public sector. There is a saying, what gets measured gets done. That can be applied in the work of the internal audit as well. This PEMPAL internal audit IACOP SIT aims to identify different types of KPI which can be used by the heads of internal audit as well as by the CHUs, Central Harmonization Units, which are the regulator, to measure the performance of internal audit activity. We'll also explore advantages and disadvantages of using different KPIs. Today, we're going to have 3 short presentations from our distinguished speakers presenting experience from the European Commission, United Kingdom, and Austria, which will be then followed by the question and answer session we'll open up, and then with commentary on the drawbacks and benefits, including on the CHU role. Now, I would like to turn to the technical which seems to be the advisor in this was finance position, and I executive committee member will be in practice is important. Colleague who will make a remarks. Actually, our chair had the amendment was by my situation and will not be able to analyze for their resources.
Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Good afternoon, dear friends. The topic, key performance indicators for internal audit activity, is extremely important for the internal auditors. The internal audit activity places great emphasis on evaluating the relevance and effectiveness of the audit subject's performance measures. However, internal auditors themselves often find it difficult to appropriately monitor and report the performance of their own audit activities. International standards for the professional practice of internal auditing require that all internal quality assessments include ongoing monitoring of the performance of the internal audit activity. It is important for all audit activities to have performance measures in place, and in order to improve their performance, to increase the efficiency, effectiveness, and added value of internal audit, and to communicate their value of their activities to management. Nevertheless, systems for measuring performance are still not developed appropriately in the public sector, differ greatly among audit activities, and are linked to the maturity level of the internal audit activity. Lack of the appropriate performance measurement is also one of the most commonly cited areas for improvement, resulting from the external quality assurance reviews. This fact is an indication of the overall need for the further development of internal auditing performance measurement. This conference seeks to analyze the current situation of performance measures within the audit profession and to examine the best practices associated with their creation and use. I wish to all of us a successful conference, and I would like to give the floor to our presenters.
Thank you, Lurka. Thanks for that, and I'm passing the floor to Jean-Pierre. Jean-Pierre to introduce the topic of KPIs. Jean-Pierre is the World Bank leader. He is a recognized internal audit global expert with more than 44 years of experience in internal auditing, and chair and member of a number of audit committees, including the Committee of the European Commission. Jean-Pierre, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Arman. Good afternoon, everybody. Arman, I don't know exactly where you are, but your voice sometimes seems to come from the sky. So it was a little bit blurred here. So I assume that somebody will take care of the slides. So next slide, please. Yes, thank you. Next one, please. So as Ljerka already said, the key performance indicators, it's part of a performance measurement process, but of the internal audit function itself. So we have, in principle, we can review every activity inside the organization, but it makes sense, and that's why we have the professional standards 1300 and the substandards in order to really also demonstrate to others that we are not accepted, in fact, from that measurement process. Now, we develop in the past key performance indicators, first in the private sector, then later on in the public sector. And we develop these indicators both for external parties as well as internal parties. And that's already a challenge that we will see in the approach. And the indicators should be a kind of a reflection of the value that we deliver, but in the eyes of our stakeholders. And as Ljerka clearly stated, in fact, the KPIs, you cannot just copy a KPI. Later on, you will hear Nathan from what they measure in the United Kingdom to something that you measure in your specific country. Why not? Because the maturity level of the internal audit function may be and will be different. So you must link it somewhere to the maturity level. Then, as you know, as internal audits, we do have a very specific role in the sense that we do have a variety of stakeholders. We have external stakeholders, we have internal stakeholders, external ones, for instance, the audit committee, where there is an audit committee, or a regulator. Internal stakeholders, usually there is only one senior management, but we do also have our auditees, our audit clients. They are also a stakeholder. And then as the head of the internal audit function, as the chief audit executive, I also want to have some feedback, in fact, of how my team, how my function is operating. And there as well, we can put somewhere the CHU. And the CHU can either be part of the audit action or can be eventually considered as an external stakeholder. Next slide, please. But if we look at all of these stakeholders, it's very difficult to find one key performance indicator that will be of direct interest to all of these stakeholders. And why is that? Because they have a different interest. They will have different expectations of internal audit. So we start from the point that we are there to bring value to the organization. And the added value, you may recall, these are two small but key words in the definition of internal audit. So here you see these stratified 4 categories of stakeholders here. You see that there is a link between the internal stakeholders, which are senior management, and the audit clients, because they operate in the same organization, and ultimately the boss of the audit client will be one of the internal stakeholders. So there you will find some common interest as well. Common interest means that you may have, let's say, a common key performance indicator, not all of them, for both categories. You will also see the link here between the internal stakeholders and the external stakeholders. The external stakeholders, so let's think about an audit committee, will exercise oversight over the internal stakeholders. So the internal stakeholders are particularly interested, in fact, in the work of internal audit that they can use as a shield in their accountability process vis-à-vis the external stakeholders. So now let's take these 4 categories one by one. Next slide, please. Hello. Okay, so let's look at the internal stakeholders here, senior management. So what may be of interest to them? The materiality level of the audit findings, they are not really interested in the nitty-gritty things that you identify. So the materiality level where they say, wow, we didn't know about it, this may be a key performance indicator. The percentage of unsatisfactory ratings, depending on your scoring system that you will apply when you issue an audit report. The frauds and the value of the frauds per year may also be something that is of direct interest to your internal stakeholder. The number of complaints that they may receive from regulatory bodies, because they see your role as internal audit to protect them from these unpleasant surprises. This may still occur and you're not the main responsible for that, but they expect from you that you help them in protecting their organization and their personal reputation there as well. They may be interested in the percentage of the high risk in your audit universe that you covered per year. And of course, you may be, but that's not that obvious yet, the percentage of internal auditors that are being promoted elsewhere in the organization. So this is, let's say, an indicator of how well management is perceiving internal audit, in the sense that they will use internal audit, in fact, as a training pool for the future managers that they need. Next slide, please. So now we move, okay, next one, to the audit clients here. Next slide.
It takes a few seconds before.
Okay, yes, thank you. So here, your audit clients, your auditees, the first measurement that you will get from them is when you send out your satisfaction survey after each and every audit. Your relationship with regard to them may also be focused on the percentage of audit issues, audit recommendations that are still open or that are being closed or that are already past, in fact, their due date as well. The percentage of recommendations accepted and or refused may also be an indicator of how successful you are, in fact, in selling your recommendation to your audit clients. And of course, the number of repeat findings. If you come back after a few years, then you find the same kind of issues over and over again. It's an indicator, in fact, that they may not pay that much value, in fact, to the results of your work. And on the other hand, how often do they call you for help, for advice? This may also be an indicator of the appreciation that they have for you. Okay, next slide, please. And next one. And now we're going to look at the category of the external stakeholders. So the audit committee may be the regulator, or you may even decide to put the category of the CHU here as well. You will also make surveys of these people once a year, usually. They may be specifically interested because they follow up on the open recommendation, at least for the very important one, for the critical ones, which one are open, which one are closed. They will measure your success in how well you are, in fact, in making the auditees accept your recommendations. And they may be, just as management, interested in the number of frauds. On the other hand, and this is unique for them, they care for the independence of internal audit. So they will look, in fact, for some indicators that are a proof of your independence, and not only the independence on paper, but the independence in reality as well. Of course, they are knowledgeable about your audit universe. They know that you cannot cover everything, but they may expect, in fact, that you cover a very high percentage of the high-risk areas there as well. Okay, next slide, please. Next one. And then we come to your own category, your own internal audit function. And it's there, in fact, that as a head of internal audit, I'm continuously interested in the dashboard that will show me how far am I on the realization of my audit plan. I can also measure the time that it takes, in fact, to issue the final report as from the date of my exit meeting with the auditees. I have my budget approved. And of course, my personnel costs, in fact, may be a fixed part of it, and that cannot be influenced by myself, but there are travel costs as well. How good am I, in fact, in managing these costs according to my budgets? Then I may have some criteria for my auditors. Years of relevant business experience, because if I want my auditors to be able to give good business advice to the auditees, they need to have that business experience as well. On the other hand, I also expect my team to have a relevant number of years of audit experience. I also want my team to get certified, to be a certified internal auditor, whether an international certification or a national one as well. And what is the turnover of my staff? So I have a forecast there, the planned turnover, but I may have unplanned turnover yet as well. And then last but not least, in fact, the number of training hours per auditor and per year. So we see these are just, in fact, a set of examples of key performance indicators that you may think about for each category. But we should not forget that for each category, you should negotiate these key performance indicators with your stakeholders, because they should be meaningful, in fact, for your stakeholders. So this was the introduction. So I wish all of you and all of us, in fact, a very good sit. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean-Pierre. Thanks a lot for setting the floor. And now I would like just to introduce Jessica Kestermont, a team leader in the quality assurance and methodology of the European Commission Internal Audit Service, who leads that function for for around 10 years. Jessica also brings extensive internal audit experience, and she has been involved in developing and implementing quality assurance and improvement program for the Internal Audit Service of the European Commission and developing the audit methodology. Jessica, please share European Commission quality assurance and KPIs experience and the practices. Thanks. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. So I will share with you how we are monitoring our performance continuously in the Commission and how we fit into the Commission's overall performance measurement or management framework. I'm just waiting for the slides to appear. Next slide, please. Okay, so briefly, I will situate a little bit the context in which we work. In fact, why are we using key performance indicators? And then I will show you in practice how and what we are doing exactly in the Commission, and then share a little bit with you what are some basic requirements if you want to use meaningful KPIs to measure your performance. And this is, of course, linked also to the challenges that you will face when you want to use good key performance indicators. Next slide, please. So as it was already mentioned before by the previous speakers, the context in which we work is situated around this IIA standard 1300, which obliges the internal auditors to have a quality assurance and improvement program, and then the various sub-standards where there is a distinction made between external and internal assessments. And as part of the internal assessments, the internal audit function should have an ongoing monitoring of the performance of its activity. This, in the context of the internal audit service of the Commission, we have to put it within the framework that all the Commission services have to work with, which is related to the performance management or measurement of the Commission services, which is in fact part of their strategic planning and programming cycle. This means that all Commission services have to develop an annual plan, a management plan, in which they set their objectives, describe their objectives, and present the key performance indicators that they will use in order to measure whether they are making progress towards the achievement of those objectives. And then at the end of the year, of course, all the services report on the results that they obtained. So the Internal Audit Service of the Commission is no exception to that. So we are facing a little bit the double obligation that within the framework of the standards, because we want to apply with the standards, and within the obligations we have internally in the Commission, we have to put those two things together and not duplicate the effort. Which is for us already one of the main challenges. Next slide, please. So of course, if you want to measure your performance, you need to know what you want to measure. So you need to know what the goals are that you set for yourself. What are the objectives towards which you want to measure the progress to. So in the Internal Audit Service of the Commission has three main operational objectives. The first two are in fact geared around the fact that we want to add value. We have given to that an external and an internal dimension, and it is a little bit related to Mr. Garritt's presentation before mine. So in the external dimension, what we want to achieve is that we want to contribute to the improvement of the operations of our auditees. These are the Commission services, but also more than 40 independent European agencies and autonomous bodies. So the Internal Audit Service of the Commission is not only the Internal Auditor of the Commission, but also many other organizations, which makes it for us also a little bit more complex if we want to demonstrate how we are contributing to the improvement of their operations. Just to give you an example, to situate a little bit, if you would not know, for example, some of these agencies are, for example, the ECDC, which you probably know now, which is because it's very much in the press. It's the European Centre for Disease Prevention and Control. So in the context of the coronavirus pandemic, they've been very much involved. Another example is Frontex, the border control agency. So this is the external dimension that we have to work in. But we also have given it an internal dimension because we also want to measure how using quality work. So we want to add value because we need to operate within the legal context. We have to respect the legal obligations that are imposed on us. And this is mainly in our context of financial regulation, which is the law that regulates the implementation of the European Union budget. And the Internal Audit Service has been created as part of this. I mean, that's our founding regulation, let's call it like that. And it imposes a number of obligations on us. Of course, we also want to measure whether we are respecting our internal methodology and guidelines, and also, of course, conformance with the international auditing standards, because this demonstrates how much we are able to provide quality audit work. And then the third operational objective is really very much the metrics, what was already referred to before. We want to ensure efficiency, deliver our strategic audit plans. We work with a 3-year strategic audit plan, and as part of that, we have an annual audit plan, which we then regularly update. But of course, we want to demonstrate how we deliver on the work we plan to do. Next slide, please. Okay, so I will give you an overview of the KPIs that we are using. So for the first objective, where we want to demonstrate that we are adding value to our stakeholders, there we show the level of satisfaction of our stakeholders. So this, for the external stakeholders, are the highest level ones. This is mainly the audit committee, and for the senior management, of course, of the Commission, which are the Directors General, and for the autonomous bodies, these are the management boards. We also measure the level of our auditee satisfaction. So at the end of every audit engagement, we conduct a survey with a number of standard questions. So the first KPI, we measure it through an annual stakeholder survey. Then the third KPI is about our timely delivery of our overall opinion on financial management. as you know, or maybe don't know, the Internal Audit Service of the Commission issues an overall opinion as it is described, as it is determined in the IAA standards, but it's only on financial management in the Commission. And the fourth one is a timely delivery of our contribution to the state of internal control in the various services that we audit. This is a KPI we only use for the Commission, because the Commission services, of course, have to give assurance on how well their internal controls function. And on the basis of our audit work every year, we provide a summary, and thereby we contribute to their reporting, their accountability on how well their internal controls function. Next slide, please. Then the KPIs that we use in order to measure whether we are delivering high quality value, these are mainly related to, they're only related to conformance to the internal auditing standards, so the IIA standards. We conduct annually an internal quality assessment. And every 5 years, of course, we have the external quality assessment. And so the results of those assessments, they are part of our KPIs. Next slide, please. And then the third objective is measured through 4 KPIs, so the progress or the achievement of the objective. So the first one is completion rate of our annual audit plan. Okay, we plan a number of audits and we want to see by the end of the year how much we have achieved of that. Then the second one is a percentage of time spent on direct audit work and audit support work. So it's also the first one and this one, and in fact the two other ones, the 4 in total, are more geared toward measuring effectiveness, but also efficiency. Because, for example, the first one is about how efficiently are we using the time that is available to us. So mainly it should go to audit work. And then the third KPI is about the timeliness of the completion and the delivery of audit reports. So we measure the time between issuing the first, formal document on which we validate formally the findings. So that's in the context of a formal validation meeting. And then the date of the final audit report to see how much time, how efficient we were and how effective we were in managing that process, that reporting process. And the fourth KPI is measuring the difference between the actual time and the budgeted time on each audit engagement. So we fix a number of budgeted days in the beginning of the year. We want to know at the end how efficient and effective we were and if we were able to respect this budgeted time. Okay, next slide, please. So for all those key performance indicators, of course, the source of the data that you're obtaining that allow you to report on the results against these, for these indicators, is important. And it is important to have reliable sources of data, of course, because this also guarantees to a high degree whether you have reliable data. For the KPIs where we use survey results, of course, this is quite straightforward. We have our annual stakeholder survey where we obtain the data, and we also have the regular auditee satisfaction surveys where we also aggregate the data that we are obtaining throughout the year. Then, of course, we have our internal monitoring, regular monitoring. For the 4 last KPIs, as we are using an IT tool to do our audit work, of course, a lot of data is stored, is put into this system, which allows us to extract the data in a reliable way, and we have these data available at every moment in time. It also ensures that we, because it's based on a regular monitoring, we use those data throughout the year. So we are in fact monitoring in a way that our data are reliable. So we do a constant check on the milestones that are set for audits. How do we comply with the milestones? How do we respect them? Also the time that is spent on audits. All of this is done in a regular monitoring where this is in fact discussed on a weekly basis. The only thing we need to do at the end of the year to report on the results of the KPI is to aggregate, to put all the data together that we have been putting together, inputting throughout the year. Then, of course, the reports of the internal and external quality assessments. These are also objective data, objective reports that we have available, so that we can report on the results against the related performance indicator. Next slide, please. Before I go further, I also want to add that what I've discussed, what I've shown you so far, are really the key performance indicators of the internal audit service. They are part of the accountability mechanism that exists towards all the stakeholders, including, in fact, the European citizen, because this information even becomes public. Of course, we use also a number of other indicators to monitor a little bit of the performance of more detailed elements. We are not necessarily reporting on them, certainly not publicly. We report on them internally, depending on the purpose, depending on the type of indicators. So, for example, we have a number of indicators that measure or monitor how we do in terms of the implementation of our follow-up strategies, audit follow-up strategy. Because as we are obliged to have a continuous follow-up, it's not always easy to monitor this if you do it piecemeal in individual follow-up audits. So we have set a number of KPIs there. For example, the number of recommendations that were reported as implemented more than 6 months ago, because we want to limit the time lapse between actually checking whether there was an effective implementation of those recommendations or not. So we cannot leave this untouched for too long. We also have an indicator that gives us the number of recommendations without or with lapsed planned implementation dates. The auditees can postpone the implementation of of certain recommendations, or they can, or the target date may have become obsolete. So we need to be following this very closely and contact our auditees regularly if we see that this KPI is going into the bad direction, and to inquire what is going on exactly. The same for a number of recommendations where the planned implementation date was postponed for more than 1 year. It will show us that we have to check with the auditee what is happening exactly, why there is such a delay, and then we can see what needs to be done about that. Or where this date, another KPI is whether this date has been postponed several times, which also shows that there is somewhere a problem with the auditee implementing the recommendations. We also have a number of other indicators that were mentioned by Mr. Garid before, such as percentage of recommendations issued that were accepted, or percentage of recommendations accepted that were reported as long overdue, etc.
Jessica, hello? I believe we have lost you, Jessica. You will need just to request to speak. Jessica, please click request to speak on the right corner, and then I will unmute you. Jessica, we'll wait for a couple of more seconds if you can connect. Okay, let's. I understand there are probably connection and bandwidth issues. So this is a virtual environment, and we get used to these type of interruptions. So let's move to our next speaker, and when Jessica connects, we'll go back to Jessica. So our next speaker is well-known Nathan Page, who is a good partner of the IACOP and PEMPAL, and he's the Group Chief Internal Auditor from the Government Internal Audit Agency of the United Kingdom, who leads the delivery of internal audit services to DEFRA, which covers 17 different organizations. Nathan brings 20 years of internal auditing experience, and he's quite coming with very useful insights from the United Kingdom system. Nathan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Arman. And just while the slides get loaded, I'd just like to say and wish everyone well, and hope you're all staying safe in these unprecedented times. I think in terms of my presentation, I will touch on elements of what Jean-Pierre has mentioned and Jennifer was also covering. But I'd really like to concentrate on some of the qualitative aspects of KPIs and share with people on the interactive workshop the kind of experience that we've developed within the Government Internal Audit Agency. Next slide, please. This first slide is really just to re-emphasize the point that Jean-Pierre made around the KPIs needing to be relevant to the organisations in which you service. The Government Internal Audit Agency within the UK covers all of the main government departments for the UK. Last year, we reset our vision and strategy for what we wanted the agency to become in the future. The strategy and the vision were based around 5 key areas: firm foundations, quality, innovation, our people, and then the impact that we have as a service. And we agreed that our overall mission was that our people provide objective insights so that central government can achieve better outcomes and value for money for the public. And we focus on this strapline within the agency of better insights and better outcomes. And what I'll go through in the next couple of slides is just how we've tried to bring that to life through our key performance indicators within the agency. Next slide, please, Arman. So this slide, if I can point out the area shaded in white in the table, these are the targets that we have within our MOU, our Memorandum of Understanding, that we ask each of our clients to sign up to every year. And as you can see, the indicators of performance there are very much around the delivery of the service, in terms of agreeing the annual plan, in terms of providing competent qualified auditors to deliver the work, making sure that we have ample time for scoping the audit, and then we have targets around issuing of terms of reference, the field work targets, and then the report finalisation process. And then at the end of the errand, there is a deadline and a delivery agreement on the head of internal audit opinion, which concludes the work that we deliver as an internal audit service. Also within that table, there are 2 other boxes, one that I've shaded red and the other that I've shaded yellow. And much the same as Jennifer alluded to with the yellow box, these are the internal KPIs that we track within the management of the Internal Audit Service, just to make sure that our plan and the way in which we're delivering our work is focusing on the key things that we need to meet in order to achieve the successful outcomes for the client and the delivery of our audit program to time and to budget. The red section alludes to some of the points that were being made also by Jennifer with regards to an annual stakeholder survey. And of course, we are bound by the International Professional Practices Framework, and we are also subject to an external 5-year assessment of the quality of the service. And the Government Internal Audit Agency is just going through that process now. But over the next couple of slides, I really wanted to drill into the qualitative side, i.e. the red box, in terms of how we cover and what we cover within that stakeholder survey. Next slide, please. This slide is really just to demonstrate how we track and monitor our internal performance and our overall delivery profile. These charts are driven very much by the internal audit software that we use. But again, these can be produced in Excel, and something similar can be developed very easily. But it's important that you know what it is you want to track and that you tailor your reporting mechanisms and management information to supporting tracking delivery. Next slide, please. In terms of the detail, what I try to demonstrate within this slide, going back to the agency's mission of better insight, better outcomes, on the left-hand side of the slide, at the assignment and the operational level, at the conclusion of every audit or every piece of work that we deliver to a client, we also always produce a customer satisfaction survey. And the questions that we ask within that survey are really around the planning, the engagement, the delivery of that piece of work. And we try and get a feel for the satisfaction that the client has in relation to how that work's been delivered and the outcomes that it achieves. What we do with that actual feedback is on a regular basis, look at our methodology over the year to see if customers are raising the same issues, and if the issues that are being raised are in the particular aspects of the audit methodology, whether it be planning, engagement or reporting, or a skills shortage. And then we have a quality and improvement program that wraps around that to make certain that we address any shortfalls in the quality of service and improve our methodology so that we have that quality circle or cycle that continues around the way in which we deliver the work on an ongoing basis. On the right-hand side of the slide, this is the level at which we engage annually, but what we've started to do now within the agency is do it every 6 months, because it is crucial to where we want to develop as an agency in terms of providing better insights and better outcomes for the public. So what we really want to understand here is the quality of the relationship that the Internal Audit Service has through the head of Internal Audit with the very senior people in the organisation. The level of people that we engage with on this survey are the principal accounting officers who are directly reporting to Parliament on how, in my case, DEFRA, as a government department, delivers on its objectives. And what we're trying to do here is ascertain whether there is a key relationship between the Internal Audit Service we provide and the strategic direction of the organisation. We're trying to assess that we're responsive, that we can adapt and be agile to the changes in the risk environment, and that when we maintain our actions with key stakeholders, that these stakeholders see what we do as being constructive, being of the moment, and we work on the basis of no surprises. So what we're trying to do with this questionnaire is really get under the skin of, are we delivering on that promise within the Memorandum of Understanding in relation to our requirements and professional auditors, but also in relation to the service expectation of the senior stakeholders. And what we want to know is that we've had a significant impact on the way in which internal audit has added value to the governance, risk management, and the system of internal control within DEFRA. We want to be certain that as well, we're also challenging in the right areas and in the right ways, and that we are actually adding value in terms of the insight that we bring to the work that we deliver. And again, most of the elements we cover within that 15-point questionnaire are very much elements of what Jean-Pierre captured earlier on within the discussion. I won't go into them in detail. The only thing I would say is that with both these questionnaires, whether it be at the assignment level or whether it be at the annual senior stakeholder level, historically, we've always sent a questionnaire out, an online questionnaire, to ask people to complete. But what we found was that we weren't getting a significant level of returns. We send out 100%. Our return rate was around about 35% in terms of responses. So what we decided to do in order to get access to this detail was to go out and follow up the questionnaires with a face-to-face interview discussion, using the questionnaire as a structure and then capturing the feedback that way. So what we find now is that our response rate is up in the 80–85% on average across the agency, which is pretty good compared to the 35%. Next slide, please. What I try to do with this slide is try and show you how we actually build our KPIs from that very base bottom layer, where we are looking at the standard KPIs, as we would term them, around delivery in terms of to time, budget, with the customer satisfaction questionnaires wrapped around it, and with the Memorandum of Understanding clearly setting the targets and the deadlines that we will work to. At the next level, we then got the assignment level feedback through the questionnaires that we issue at the end of every assignment. And what we're trying to do there is ascertain what things we can do better on an ongoing basis in relation to the way we deliver individual audit assignments. And then at the top of the pyramid, we've got the annual impact questionnaire that we use to get the views of senior stakeholders in terms of how the work of GIA is being perceived in terms of penetration, as well as the coverage of the agency, with a view to actually providing better insights and better outcomes across the government within the UK. One of the real powerful benefits of being part of the Government Internal Audit Agency connected in the way that we are is that we can now share good practice and experiences across internal audit service within the UK government. But what we need to do is understand how better to present that, how to communicate the message so that we get the right outcomes, because at the end of the day, that is our mission, to provide the better insights and then hopefully achieve better outcomes for the public money and for the public citizens at large. Next slide, please. all that remains for me to do is to thank you all for your patience. I won't take questions now because I know that there's an opportunity for us to talk and for you to ask questions later. So thank you very much for your time, and I'll hand back to Arman.
Thank you very much, Nathan, and thanks for, it was very insightful to share the experience of the shared audit service, how it operates and how KPIs are applied. It was quite insightful and probably similar to the European Commission, as they also have this shared service model. I understand that Jessica is back. Jessica, can you please request to speak? Yes, I am accepting. And Lucina, please put the slides on. Jessica, can you speak up, please?
It's the mic. Okay.
Yes, please go ahead. We can hear you.
Okay. I suppose that everybody can hear me. So just continue. Yes, sorry. Okay. So I just wanted to say something about now about what the real requirements and challenges are that you are confronted with if you want to use KPIs to measure, to monitor your performance. So the first one is really related to your objectives. You have to set the right objectives, meaning that they have to be SMART, so specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So this is the first prerequisite. If you do not have SMART objectives, your key performance indicators will probably not be very meaningful either. But for those indicators to be meaningful, they need to be RACER, meaning relevant, accepted, credible, easy to monitor, and robust. So relevant, you have to make sure that there is a strong correlation between the objective that you want to achieve and the indicator you wish to use. The indicator needs to be acceptable, so easily understood by all those who will use them, who will receive a report on their results. They have to be credible, so unambiguous, easy to interpret, understandable by non-experts, no technical things that nobody is able to follow. They have to be easy to monitor, so it should be quite easy and possible to collect the data with the available resources, and you have to be able to analyze them in a straightforward way. And they have to be robust, meaning that they have to be able to monitor actual changes, so that you're not monitoring long-term impacts, or that you're not able to measure progress from a specific point in time towards a longer-term improvement. Next slide, please. So what is important to have for having relevant indicators is that you need to use baselines and set targets. So you have to have a certain point from which on you want to measure. For example, the indicator results of a specific period, a specific point in time in the past, which is then your starting position. And of course, you want to track performance against the set targets. For longer term targets, you need to set milestones. For example, it may be the case if you would use only an indicator where you measure the results of your external assessment. This is only done every 5 years, so you need to have something in between for the shorter term. Then reliability of source data is of course important. I already mentioned it before. If you use these data to monitor your performance throughout the year, and then you report once a year, normally your data should be more reliable. Then something about stakeholder and client satisfaction surveys, because they are they lead to indicators that are more of a qualitative. They are more of qualitative nature rather than quantitative metrics that you're using. So you have to be sure that those surveys are relevant. So your questions need to be relevant, and the respondents, so the people you are surveying, have to be relevant as well for what you want to measure. Also, the frequency and timing of service is important. After every audit engagement, for auditee satisfaction surveys, once a year or twice a year, depending on your organization, for larger, more high-level stakeholder surveys. And then there is also the element of response rates, which was mentioned also before by the speaker before. We have also found that response rates may differ enormously in time, knowing that 30% on average for any kind of survey is not such a bad result. But of course, sometimes you want to have more. And what we are doing in the Commission is each time we analyze why we try to analyze, we discuss why we have certain low response rates, and then we try to act accordingly by, for example, contacting people individually if it's really important to have a high response rate, or by not surveying the same persons each and every time when you go to a certain auditee regularly several times per year. So this may, of course, have an impact on response rates. And then the really a big challenge for at least for the Internal Audit Service in the Commission is that we have to fit our own performance management framework within the organizations, which will become for us an even bigger challenge, because for the new Commission now under President von der Leyen, we will have to, as any other Commission service, we will have to choose a number of impact indicators that are defined at the corporate level, and where we have to measure how we will contribute to the achievement of the specific objectives European Commission wide, which are the so-called von der Leyen headline ambitions, which is not going to be really very easy for us to do. Next slide, please. So I think that this is the end of the presentation. Yes, thank you. So, okay, there may be questions later on if you want to have more information on how we work in the Commission. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jessica. Thanks for very insightful information, and also the structure you would have with SMART and RACER, and also the indicators which many countries face. I expect there will be more questions coming during the Q&A session. Now let's move to Austria, and I would like just to pass the floor to Hannes Schulz, who is a PEMPAL good partner and is a Chief Audit Executive of the Federal Ministry of Finance of Austria for over 17 years. Hannes brings both experience in internal audit as well as broader public sector, and including in tax administration. And he is still co-editor of the Austrian Handbook on Practice of Tax Auditing. Hannes holds a doctoral degree in law, a postgraduate master's degree in public auditing, and has several professional certifications. Hannes, thank you for joining us. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Arman, for the kind presentation, and many thanks to IACOP for the invitation. May I have the slides, please? Arman, you mentioned at the very beginning what gets measured gets done. That's fully right, but we all are aware that what is done not necessarily is what has to be done. And I'm more than happy when I read the PEMPAL guidance on internal audit, demonstrating and measuring added value, and when I heard colleagues just in these presentations that they are fully aware of that situation, and they focus on say the essential things, on things that are very important. I'm waiting for the presentation. I will show you some slides. Not always reading the slides text by text, but just giving a very brief overview of the one or the other idea. Thank you very much. Maybe we could go to the next slide. The next slide is about our audit universe. Jean-Pierre Garita said that KPIs are directly linked also to the maturity level of the internal audit function. You see here our understanding of the audit universe. I will not explain it in detail, but I just want to underline that our understanding is that what could be managed can be audited. And to say it a little bit more in detail, we ask the questions: how well does the organization work? How well does the organization implement changes? And how well is the organization prepared to be fit for future? So we try to cover the whole range of what could be managed. Next slide, please. The next slide is, I guess, very well known, but for us it's the basis of the KPIs of Internal Audit Department. You see here the orange line: objectives, inputs, activities, outputs. Yes, then I have added outcomes and effects. Today we also heard something about impacts. The reason is that sometimes the definition of outcomes and effects is not so clear. But what you see here is that we try to distinguish between certain areas, certain groups. The first one is Internal Audit Department. The second one I called stakeholder. Maybe it's not the right word, but what is meant, anyway, it's meant that everyone who has a direct contact to Internal Audit Department is mentioned here. It's the auditee as well as the audit committee, as well as, in our case, the minister, as well as the persons in charge to implement our recommendations. And the shareholders in that sense, so to say, the other managers of the organization, and maybe to some part also civil society, if this society has an active part. And arrows in principle indicate in different colors the accountability, who is accountable for what, but all in all, we give an overview from the perspective of internal audit. And maybe what's the most important thing is that we divide in two different areas. One is, I call it here, a static situation. It is focused on the year. Maybe it's shorter, and the other perspective is a dynamic perspective. It's about further development in a mid-term perspective. And this also is reflected to our understanding of KPIs. All those activities, all those areas are embedded in our balanced scorecard. And KPIs are, so to say, a selected bundle of indicators we take from our balanced scorecard. Next slide. The next slide is nothing else than showing our balanced scorecard in a very generic way. In principle, we have 4 strategic perspectives: meaning, learning and growing perspective, process perspective, customer perspective, and the value perspective. And we have, so to say, bottom up strategic goals, where different elements of the strategic perspectives are touched. It's not necessary to read them, but we have a very holistic approach on how to cooperate with our organization, and we have targets at every perspective and the goal too. So in total we have 20 targets. So next slide, please. Maybe it's the most interesting. Here you see with different colors and different lines and separate presentations, you see different things. On the one hand, you have here the KPIs I call static, which means that we have them year by year, sometimes also several times per year. The next would be then the midterm KPIs we have every 4 years at about, just for distinction. We have quantitative as well as qualitative KPIs, and the colors symbolize in principle the perspectives of the balanced scorecard, learning growth, and so on. You see it, and the orange one is more or less an overall view symbolizing, so to say, the strategic alignment. So qualitative KPIs are mainly the result of internal quality assessments, which is the annual results and is measured by the feedbacks in sum from all auditees. We have here also mentioned independency of IAD, here with several aspects. In that case, it's an annual presentation indicator, as we have to react very soon if there is a breach of such aspects, like the position shifted. We have to act, to say something. If we have unlawful interventions, we have to react, and so on. So this is a KPI we have for in the yearly document, and the result is, and this is measured, is the disclosure of impairments in the annual statement of independency. The next is about the qualifications of staff. It is not days of training, but it is predefined trainings we have passed, and especially the examinations we have passed successfully. The gray area, I will name it in total, is yes, about auditing, about the days, about the recommendations. That's quite usual. We have it everywhere, I guess. Then the next area, the dark blue, qualitative KPIs, is perceived quality of audits, is perceived quality of reports. We have scales from 1 to 4, and our target is to be in the best area, which always is between 1 and 1.5. Then we have, yes, an area called IA marketing measures, which is about maybe marketing is too ambitious, does not address it correctly. Marketing means it communication, but actively driven, and also having in mind the internal audit and its quality and its importance as such. We have here numbers of feedbacks, distribution of annual reports, not the the annual report itself, but the distribution, how many persons are reached, and so on. And then we have the classical situation about recommendations, agreements, and the implementation, and maybe the delay of the implementation. Next slide. The next slide is about the mid-term perspective. Have in mind, so to say, the further development within the next 4 years. If you look back, then you have the result of external quality assessment. We have it every 4, not every 5 years. And it also is the result we have in the same time about the level of maturity. We have here certain aspects of independency of the Internal Audit Directorate, like budget resources, salary systems, and so on. This has to be reflected in also in notes of annual statement of independencies, but anyway, it's not to be solved within 1 year very often. Then we have knowledge, again, not measured in training days, but here we have a knowledge map and how is the further development, like the movement from junior auditors to senior auditors, and so on and so on. The next thing is having a seat at the table, meaning how often do we participate at the most important strategic meetings, or the meetings at the steering committees of the most important programs, and so on. The next area, needs-based internal audit marketing measures, are about information and trainings on demand, being also sparring partner in discussion about risk management, and so on. So we measure it, and it's a long-term observation and not an annual goal. The next area is risk adequacy, which is, to say it in simple words, the fulfillment of the mid-term audit plan. Then we have preconditions for staff careers. These are quantitative aspects insofar as they are given from outside. You have to collect some points to be able to promote to a director level, and this is watched here and fixed as an KPI. And the last one is partnering for further development. We have here focus on studies, pre-studies on demand of the cabinet. How often are we involved in the most important issues of the organization for discussion? Next slide. The next slide more or less anticipates the discussion that will be raised. So I will not answer in detail, but for me, again, and I repeat all what you have said, the most important thing is that KPIs are somehow positioned like a balanced scorecard, or say it in other words, they touch strategy and operations as well. My most, say, biggest problem in theory, or about theory, is the next one, is the discussion about the 3 E's. Yes, it is important, but for me, the focus is not on the 3 cycles isolated, economy, efficiency, effectiveness, but it is the overlapping area, because you cannot see one part without the other. The next slide, please, is just to mention it, I very often rely not on single data, but on combinations of data. So KPI for me very often is a result of several aspects and not of one single aspect. And for me, the most important thing is the result of external quality assessment and the grade of maturity. Maybe we'll have the chance to explain it a little bit in the discussion. Coming to the last slide, please. The last slide are some ideas about my problems. First of all, quality always is a challenge, how to measure it, and I'm eager to find good ideas and to implement them in our system. What I'm not sure about how to act or react is resilience and agility, which is now up to date in the discussion, at least in Austria. Should this be shown? Should this be part and how of the performance indicators? The next thing, but that's my eternal problem, is continuous auditing, how to show that as a performance indicator. And the last thing, and this has to do with, say, disaster management. In all parts now we have coronavirus, but we also could have disasters with regards to IT, with regards to financial aspects, whatever. This is to find the balance between consultancy on the one hand and how to cooperate and networking with other internal audit departments on the other hand. CHU, I'm sure, has the better solution, but for me, it's a problem to get connected to the others. Just in brief, that was it, and I'm happy to have then the questions and the discussions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Hannes. Thank you for good insights and for the information shared, including on the external assessment being quality assessment being the key, and how to move to the continuing auditing considering the current COVID impact, pandemic impact, and risk management, disaster risk management, and business continuity planning aspects. Now is the time to open up for the questions. Dear participants, please click on the request to speak button, and I will be happy to give the floor to you. In parallel, I already started receiving questions. I would just first probably start with one question to Jessica, Nathan, and Hannes. We're talking about various quantitative and qualitative KPIs. Can the KPI referred in your presentation be quantified in a monetary or financial terms, not only cost versus the budget as it is presented in many presentations, but much more on the savings? What is the real value? How it can be assessed in financial terms? Who would like to go first?
Okay, yes, thank you very much. Now I'm more than reluctant with the financial aspects, with the monetary terms of the KPIs, because the main question for me is who is responsible for the financial aspects. We could, of course, have a lot of discussion on the first E, on economy, on the reduction of our costs, right? But if we try to move the organization forward to do the next steps, I'm reluctant to say, if you do it, I am the initiator of additional money. I want to give this honors more to the auditees than to collect it in in my success story. That's the problem with the monetary aspects from my personal side.
Johannes, Nathan.
I would support what Hannes has said in the main. I think looking at it from the UK perspective, I'd go back to our mission of better insights, better outcomes. We don't necessarily always own the outcomes that we will guide, advise, suggest to management that they should implement. So what we try and do within the team is focus on the outcome. And sometimes that can be financial. Sometimes you can prevent a fraud and you can easily put a financial metric around it. But we've tended to not do that because we feel that to focus purely on the kind of monetary value of internal audit kind of misses some of the point of what the service is about. And what we believe is in the UK, and our experience has shown us that to get those outcomes, you really need the owners to buy into what you as an internal audit service identify as areas of weakness or the need for new control. Because by owning that, the outcome is then theirs to deliver and there's more chance of it succeeding. So we've tended to not look at the kind of measurements in a financial sense, other than the time, cost, budget monitoring type issues that are traditional KPIs in an internal audit service or in any service context.
Thank you, Nathan. Jean-Pierre, would like just to reflect on this question.
Yes, thank you, Arman. Yes, I totally support and endorse what Nathan and Hannes have said here. Of course, there is an appetite for management to express almost everything in financial terms, including internal audit, and ultimately, what is your return, in fact, on the investment in internal audit. But that would generate the risk that we would less have an eye for risks related to reputation and to compliance, because ultimately these reports will not generate a financial return as well. So although there may be some KPIs that are really related to that, for instance, when you talk about the economy, when Hannes talked about the economy, and the efficiency of the use of internal audit, this can be expressed in financial terms, but not everything.
Jean-Pierre, dear participants, you can type your questions again in the messaging or just click on the request to speak, Jessica, and then raise your questions. Jessica, please.
Arman, you're muted.
Thank you. Thanks, Jean-Pierre. So let's, I understand Jessica, she's muted probably, so we can move to the second question. Is the achievement of KPI, how do we how do we encourage achievement of KPIs? And there are always questions coming of whether the achievement of KPI can be linked to the reward system, for example, bonuses, promotions, increase in salary, or this underachievement of KPI to any disciplinary measures, which are quite still considered in many countries of ECA in our region. So it's very interesting to learn from your experience. Who would like to go first?
Yes, Hannes.
Yes,
okay,
Hannes.
thank you. Now, I'm not sure whether I'm able to answer the question correctly. First, we have a reward system. The system has a volume of about a 1 month's salary, but it is not directly linked to certain KPIs. On the one hand, on the other hand, it's somehow linked to the balance scorecard itself. So if you pick out single KPIs, it's more or less, on the one hand, the fulfillment of the audit plan, and on the other hand, the quality of the work of the single auditors in relation to a case. So it's how well is the work done, which is estimated by myself on the one hand, and on the other hand, I have the feedbacks from the auditees, so I can form a picture. To say it on the point, we have a reward system, and it's fixed on the KPI fulfillment of audit plan and the quality of the single case. And beside this, we have additional aspects which are outside the KPIs, like individual trainings. That's it.
Nathan, what is your view on?
We don't have a reward system that links directly to KPIs. Historically, we did have something in place that would be an automatic trigger for when somebody received a customer satisfaction questionnaire with very high scores. But what we then found was there was a tendency within the teams to not go for some of the difficult messages or hard-hitting points in an audit because they knew it would detract from the score that they would get in the satisfaction survey and therefore wouldn't get the bonus. So there was an issue with the right behaviours not being demonstrated across the teams. So we don't have any kind of direct link to a KPI achievement triggering a bonus or a reward. However, in similar vein to what Hannes has just mentioned, we use the KPI mechanisms for identifying deficiencies in training or skills, to try and use them in a constructive way that way. In terms of achievement of KPIs, the whole suite of KPIs is considered as part of the annual appraisal cycle that everybody within the agency is subject to. So they are part of the consideration that then informs how they're assessed performance-wise over the year, which does have a kind of payment attached to it. But it's not based on an individual KPI or an individual assignment. It's looking at a continuous period of performance over a year with those elements taken into account. Thank you.
Thanks, Nathan. Jessica would like to comment on that. Yes, please.
I just would like to add that. Yeah, I just would like to add that in the Commission we do not have really a reward system related to the KPIs that we are using to measure the services performance. But as I agree with Nathan, and we have a similar system that, of course, the results of certain KPIs are linked to individual persons' performance in the annual appraisal exercise. And of course, this leads them to better, less good merit, and in the end to possible promotion. But there is no strict and straightforward link to rewarding and how well an individual performed as part of the audit service.
Thank you, Jessica. Jean-Pierre, would you like just to react on that?
Yes, I believe now I have to focus a little bit more on the public sector. In the public sector, I do not know many cases, in fact, where bonus system, a reward system, is really linked to the KPIs. In the negative sense, sometimes yes. So if you do not achieve certain KPIs, you may have to go. I'm not sure whether there is somebody from the Russian Federation in the audience, because in the Russian Federation, they do have a bonus system in the public sector. So there may be some linkage to the KPIs for internal audit as well.
Thank you. I just receiving there is another questions. Again, friends, if you have questions, please request to click request to speak button so you can raise the question or just type in the messaging center. Next question is about any impact of COVID pandemic on KPIs. So do we continue business as usual, or the COVID pandemic had an impact, as Hannes, for example, referred to continuing auditing or how to measure it, or disaster risk management, business continuity planning? Any specific impact? Who would like to go first?
So
Yes, Hannes.
Sorry, I don't be always the first, but excuse me. For me, the KPIs as such, the abstract parameters will not change, but maybe the percentage or the absolute number might change in the one or the other area. Especially there could be a shift between audits and consultancies. That might be the most important factor for the moment. Thank you.
Thanks, Hannes. So how to assess the consultancy versus the proportion, probably. Nathan, please.
Yeah, within the agency, we have amended our KPIs slightly, but not so much in the delivery of the audit service. I agree with what Hannes has just said. In construct, the audit product that we still deliver is exactly the same. There are the challenges with auditing remotely and everything that goes with it. So the one thing that we're measuring additionally as a direct result of the COVID pandemic is an indicator at the agency level in relation to the well-being of our people. So an indicator there in terms of how they're feeling about their work, around how they're feeling around being anxious, around the potential for return to work. So it's not a direct performance indicator in terms of service delivery, but it's something at an agency level where you have 500 or 600 auditors, that it's the kind of thing that as leaders of that organization, we need to have more intelligence on. Because if our people's well-being is not there and working effectively, then the audit program and the service we deliver is likely to suffer now and in the future. So that is one way in which we've changed our KPIs at the agency level to take account of the COVID pandemic.
Thank you, Nathan. Jessica, just keeping the flow.
Yes. In the IAS, we are not changing at this moment our KPIs either, but of course there may be, we may not reach certain targets that we set for our KPIs to be seen for the time being not, but towards the end of the year we will know more. For example, we have a KPI that measures how well we were able to implement our audit plan. Maybe we will not be able to implement certain, to conduct certain audits, and that we will see in the results. We will not necessarily adapt our KPI to it, but we will explain why we did not obtain the target. It may be that we need to adjust certain KPIs for next year, depending on how things evolve. If we still need to take into account any possible influence from the pandemic, we will have to see. I also have to add that, I mean, just to add to what Nathan said, one of our KPIs is also part of one of the more general KPIs the Commission is using, which is indeed related with well-being at work. So we are using the results for our own service as part of the overall organization's results. And this will also measure how our auditors were able to cope with the pandemic situation during their audit work.
Thanks, Jessica. I understand Miora has a question. Miora, please.
Yes, thank you, Arman. I have a particular question for Nathan and Hannes. Because I suppose the internal audit department in their countries was not born with KPIs. And probably the transition process to have such elaborated KPIs was, I don't know, I suppose probably long or short. Could you share with us some I don't know, experience regarding the time necessary to have such system, good system for KPIs? Thank you.
Shall I go
Yes,
first
Nathan.
this time? Save Hannes the embarrassment of being first all the time. Hello, Myra. I hope you're well. I think in terms of time frame, it's quite difficult to say that it will take 1, 2, 3 years, months, or whatever. It will take as long as it takes. I think the important thing to not lose sight of is about keeping the KPIs relevant to the organization and the service you agree to deliver. How they then evolve over time is really a case of you determining which are the key things that you see as significant in relation to your internal delivery profile, in terms of what your stakeholders see as significant from the service that you offer them. And I think through a combination of those factors, as well as any external good practice, is probably the step-by-step process that I would go through. It's difficult to put a timeline around that, Maura. I'm just being completely honest with you. But I think having a logical sequence to do it is the important thing, rather than the time it takes. And the reality is, key performance indicators, in the main, you will stick with a couple that are consistent throughout the time that you have implemented them. But on the fringes of them, some will be subject to change because of different environments in which you operate and different ways of working that will evolve over that period. So I think timeline, in truth, it never ends because they're quite dynamic in terms of how responsive your services that you deliver to stakeholders, and of course changes to stakeholders and the external environment. So I'm sorry, I didn't really answer your question, but hopefully I've given you an indication of where I see the significant steps that you need to go through are within the process.
Thanks, Nathan. Who would like to?
Yes. Yes, in principle, there's nothing to add what Nathan had said. So it takes time. On the one hand, you have to be in a good contact, in a good discussion with the, say, superiors. In our case, it's the cabinet and the minister. And the third thing, from my point of view, in our special case, is we should not overload the discussion. We started the discussion with the balanced scorecard. We further developed the balanced scorecard. And in that case, in our case, the KPIs are, so to say, a byproduct of the balanced scorecard. They are not developed separately, but they are seen as part of the BSC. Thank you.
If can I add something? I think as a conclusion for me, because I'm also interested in this this subject, you have to add to your activity also this point, to establish very good KPIs and to try to develop and to see also on this this way. And you promised, Hannes, to talk to talk about the grade of the maturity of the system related to the KPIs. if it's possible, just a little to develop, because it's very important. Because like you mentioned before, sometimes, and also Jean-Pierre mentioned, sometimes when you see the same deficiency, the same weaknesses of the system in each year, is a problem with the system, and the system is probably not sufficient mature for improvements, to see the improvements. Thank you.
Thanks, Miora. Any reflections from speakers, or we can move to the next question? Okay, so our next question is actually to Hannes. How is the grade of maturity assessed and linked to the KPIs? Can you please just elaborate on that? Hannes, no, you are the first now.
Yes. The work is very complex, but the answer is quite simple. We have external assessment according to IRA standards every 4 years. So the first half of the question is that the result is an information about compliance, partially compliance, non-compliance in the well-known 52 areas of the IRA standards. The target is for our situation that in 90%, meaning 46 at about areas, we have to fully comply with the standards, and the other 10% are allowed to be partially compliant, but no area is allowed to be non-compliant. That's one part. The other part is that at the same time, when we do the quality assessment, the external quality assessment, we do also, say, a benchmark. We estimate or calculate our maturity. This is an international model offered by, for example, one of the big fours. So in our case, we selected, if I'm allowed to name it, I don't know, Ernst & Young for the maturity model. They have, I have it here, 25 areas to be evaluated. They are bundled in 6 main areas, and then we got the results. Our target is that if we have maturity levels in the system offered from more than 4, meaning 5 upwards, we should be positioned at least in the second highest level. In our case, there were several maturity levels, and we are positioned in the sixth level, which is called leading, for example. And then we have a little bit more defined it. We should not have in one of the main areas an evaluation which is less than the second highest degree, and if possible, we should have one evaluation in one of the main areas higher than the second, meaning that we should be in the highest level. That's quite easy. It's naming the position where we want to be when we are audited, let's say. But the problem is the complexity behind. As I have said, 52 standards, and in maturity case, 25 areas. Thank you.
Grigor, Gyuli, you are first.
Oh, thank you so much. Oh, sorry.
First, yeah, Gyuli and then Grigor. Now, Gyuli, please go ahead.
Sorry. I missed your voice and I thought I was first. Sorry, Grigor, I'm very sorry. So first of all, I want to say that we are all very happy that PEMPAL is so active in this period, and this our previous recommendations about how to act from how to work from home, and these recommendations about COVID, they were vital and very necessary and very timely for us. Thank you so much for being so timely and so helpful. Secondly, this topic is for us, I think, one of the most important as we are now actually moving to the quality improvement, and we are now like discovering the more reaching more and more difficult mountains in our work, and so it is important to know where we are and where we want to go. But my question here is what is the involvement of the management in setting the KPIs or assessing the KPIs, or how deeply should we involve them? Like I want to look at this from both perspectives. If you could answer this question from both perspectives. So what is our ideal situation? So from internal auditors' perspective, and what would be the management's ideal perspective about the setting the KPIs, and then of course monitoring its assessment and fulfillment. And could that be such case that the KPIs that we set for us are not relevant for the management? I mean, or they think that they are not relevant. What are we doing in such case, and this kinds of stuff? Because I am still keen on the idea that our one of the most important mission is to add value for the management. I don't know if I expressed what I wanted to ask.
Yes, very good question. Thank you, Guli. So
presentations
yes,
were wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Guli. That is. Can you please mute, Grigor? I think it's your. Yeah, thank you. So the question is about management, not audit committee, but management. How management should be kept happy, and what is their role in the KPI? Who would like to go first? Yes, Nathan.
I suppose from the UK perspective, particularly when it comes to the quality and the added value, to go right back to the first presentation from Jean-Pierre, what's added value will vary from departments to managers to the environments in which you audit. So I think it is important to understand what your management would see as adding value from an internal audit service context. So I think in that regard, there has to be an active engagement with management to understand where they see the value coming from the internal audit service, and then align indicators there accordingly. There will be other indicators, and in the UK example, that kind of position of what's important to management, we capture in the MOU document that I mentioned in my presentation, so that we clearly understand what they see as significant and important to be delivered, and then we introduce mechanisms to monitor that, and we agree to report to them regularly on the progress against the indicators of the added value as they see it. Internally, I think there are the wider KPIs that are much more metric based to make certain that we stay within our financial limits and that we deliver a service to time, cost, as well as quality. But I do think the engagement with management is important in terms of driving how you define your KPIs. Particularly in the UK, because if we're going to achieve the outcomes that we want to as a government, we've got to be able to engage with managers in a way that they see the value of the service we add, and the way in which we deliver our service evolves to support their outcomes. So I would definitely say there is an engagement with them to identify the right things to monitor. I think how you monitor, how you progress, how you may alter things in response to delivering that added value is something that the management team locally within the Internal Audit Service will think about the actions they need to take to deliver on the KPIs that you've agreed based on those discussions with management. Thank you.
Thanks, Nathan. Anybody would like to react? Okay. Then the question goes to Grigor, please. Grigor.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Nice to see you, and thank you to organizers to organize this very important meeting. So I would like to mark some few questions. In last year, we organized the same conference. Arman was participate, and one of the topics of our internal audit conference of defense was the KPIs during the audit activity. So we discussed one more topic. We had a we had two sides of KPIs. Yeah, one KPIs is the manager's KPIs. We are set it to understand how your strategy is achieved, how your success and how this results, and we can set KPIs for audit activity. Actually, I mean, we can set KPIs for each engagement or all our strategy planning or everything. So everything should be used by auditors during the audit engagement. I would like to hear a few words from your side about the three types of KPIs. KPIs of engagement, KPIs of audit in globally strategy, and KPIs, which one is used managers to monitor their procedures, and how we are the mostly concentrating that, how we use managers KPIs during our audit engagement.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Igor. Nathan, would you like to go again first? Or
yeah, no, happy to. And thank you for the question. So I think in terms of talking about the internal audit KPIs initially, what we would monitor internally are more of the plan delivery, time to budget, the utilization of the auditor, that kind of stuff that's important to ensure that we're staying on track with our plans, whether they be assurance plans or budgets, the financial plan, but not necessarily would we share those with management. At the management level, what they would want to see are some of the elements within my presentation I had in the white text on the table, the white boxes, which are more around the delivery of the final report, the agreement of the terms of reference, the overall opinion at the year end, because they're keen to know, from my experience, what it is that we expect of them and when we need them to engage with the audit process. You know, one of the things we've touched on here around the KPIs, but it's worth a point, and it's worth making the point, I should say, is that in order for internal audit to be successful, the relationship with management has to work together. It has to come together. And the KPIs are one way of doing that. We do it also with a memorandum of understanding so that we each understand the respective roles and how we'll work together. So in the KPI context for the internal audit service, that's the way that we approach things within the UK. I think the second part of Gregor's question was more around if we are auditing performance indicators in a management context. And what I would do there is refer you to Jessica's presentation, which was if we're looking at indicators of performance and successful achievement of performance indicators, we would look at them in two ways. We'd look at them initially along the lines of what Jessica suggested around the SMART, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-related. We'd want to be certain that actually they're very well and clearly articulated in terms of what they're trying to achieve as an objective and how that objective is then going to be measured. And that's where the RACER acronym came in. With the performance indicators themselves, we then want to be certain that the evidence as defined in terms of achieving the outcome was there and relevant to the review and what we would test. Now, sometimes that is very quantitative in nature. It could be around achieving a financial budget and delivering a plan to that budget, or it could be very much based on the quality of the service delivered. But again, we would want to see the evidence in place to demonstrate that that performance indicator had been achieved, which successfully aligned with the objective that was under review, whether that be at the individual assignment level or a collective review process in terms of, in our case, an agency's performance. I think I've probably covered the two questions that were raised, but if not, I'm happy to expand further, Arman.
Thank you, Nathan. Just to pause if any other speaker. Okay, and then the last question, and then we can move to the commentary from Jean-Pierre. The last question is actually from Filaretta. The question is, can we have a KPI which would be for across beyond in only internal audit to cover other assurance providers from the ODT perspective, efficiency, effectiveness, and disruption to their institutions? So who has an experience of like Supreme Audit Institution or other assurance control bodies, any KPI? Hannes, is there any experience in Austria, for example? You are muted.
Sorry, I would say that I have too less experience in that part, so I couldn't give you the right answer.
Yes,
Sorry.
thanks. Jessica, what about European Court of Audit? Do you have any KPI which is cross internal audit service and European Court of Audit?
No, we do not have. Do you hear me? Yes. Okay.
Yes.
We do not have a specific KPI for that, but of course, the European Court of Auditors also has access to the results for our KPIs because it's public information. And of course, what they are most interested is that we can function as an independent audit function so that they could rely on us if they want to for part of their assurance. And hopefully this is what they get through the results of our KPIs. One of them being the external assessment results, the external quality assessment results, which is for them probably a very important indicator.
Thank you very much. And Nathan, no experience from UK?
The only indicator we have is to ensure that as part of our annual planning process, we liaise with our National Audit Office and other assurance providers to look at where we can cooperate and work jointly. When it comes to an indication of quality, and it's very much alluding to the point Jessica made there, the National Audit Office in the UK will take the markers of quality such as the EQA and our audit charter, which signifies our independence, as important documents to have. But they will also do the very basic checks that are in line with the international auditing standards on placing reliance on other providers, where they look at the basis on which the work has been put together, therefore the underpinning quality of the opinion and the evidence that they then base their work on. So we do that with any NAO work that we place reliance on, or other second line assurance activities within UK government, and the NAO will do the same of us when it comes to placing reliance on the work that we've completed.
Thank you, Nathan. Now passing the floor to Jean-Pierre for commentary. Also to bring, Jean-Pierre, can you bring quantitative KPI which CHU can use to measure internal audit units' performance? Jean-Pierre.
Thank you, Armand. Yes, I believe if we look back at the presentation by all of the presenters, they were great. I believe all three of them were also able to put different accents. In fact, you could see that for some of them, like European Commission, it was the financial regulation that was the major action. Then you had a combination of qualitative KPIs with versus quantitative KPIs, and then some of the KPIs were then on the short term separately from the long-term KPIs. So that's all good, because it also demonstrates a kind of a progress in it. And that progressivity in the KPIs is very important. And when we listen to Miyohara, where she says, okay, this is all very new to us, I would not completely agree with that, because you will have KPIs, but you don't call them KPIs right now. But you will have some measurement criteria as well. And I believe that all of the participants today, you should not just tomorrow start to copy and paste what you heard. You pick out, let's say, the most realistic ones that you can achieve. But we should not forget, and that's critical, a key performance indicator. It's not about how do you think that you bring that added value and that quality to the organization. That quality is determined, in fact, by the recipient of your services, whether that recipient is an internal stakeholder, an external stakeholder, an auditee, or even, in fact, yourself as a chief audit executive versus your staff. So a key performance indicator is the result of a negotiation between these two parties. It's not one party who says, when I achieve that figure here, 85 or 100, this is quality. No, the other party has to agree with it. And first of all, before you agree, the other party has to, let's say, identify that measurement criteria as relevant for him or for her. And so that's very, very, very critical here. They have to be negotiated, in fact, with all of the stakeholders. And as I said at the very beginning, a performance indicator for senior management will be different compared to a performance indicator for an auditee. They will have different ones. But even with the auditee, we all send surveys to the auditees. We send surveys to senior management once a year as well. But how often do we ask the auditee, what kind of question would you like to see in my survey? We tend to issue a survey with only the questions that we believe that are relevant. But when I'm a recipient of this kind of survey, I will always, let's say, find items that are not there and that I would like to add. So we have to think together with them about the kind of survey that we launch. Then also, and I heard it a couple of times during the presentation, KPIs is totally different from compliance. A compliance with some items is a must. The fact that you comply doesn't mean that you bring added. It's the added, it's the extra value. The compliance is the minimum requirements. And if you want to add something to improve your services, that's where we develop these KPIs for. Then we also have to be very careful about KPIs that can be manipulated. Okay, excuse me for the term of manipulation, but there are a number of KPIs that can be manipulated. Take, for example, the achievement of the audit plan. I put a system in place whereby changes to the audit plan are almost immediately approved by senior management and by the audit committee. Of course, at the end of the year, I have a 100% achievement. So what is the meaning of that KPI? We have KPIs on the percentage of audit recommendations accepted. I gave it in my list as well at the beginning of the year. If we know beforehand, in fact, that a recommendation has a very high chance of being accepted, okay, I apply the salami technique and I make out of that one recommendation, I make 5 recommendations in order to increase my KPI at the end of the year. So we have to think about this as well and try to eliminate as much as possible these KPIs that can be manipulated, at least with regard to external or internal stakeholders or other people. Inside my audit department, I can use this, but these KPIs may become less relevant for my stakeholder. One KPI that I did not identify everywhere is the application of innovative techniques as internal audit. And so I can say, for instance, that it is my goal to at least generate and implement 2 innovative ideas a year, not only innovative ideas that will help me as an audit function, but innovative ideas, in fact, that will help the organization. Now, to come back, Arman, with your last questions, what can the CHU do? I believe the CHU should help every internal audit function in establishing these KPIs. But what the CHU should not do is to set a list. These are the KPIs that you need to implement. Because again, the KPIs go together with the maturity level of internal audit inside the organization. And inside every ministry, for instance, or institution, the level of maturity may be and will be different. And the needs, the expectations of these stakeholders will be different. And so here I would expect the CHU to learn from this sit and about techniques and good approaches in order to help every single internal audit function to implement the right KPIs. And again, let's make the KPIs progressive. This is where I want to be in the year N+1. This is where I want to be in the year N+2. So it is progressive, and it will also demonstrate to our stakeholders that we are capable of raising the bar, and that the KPIs do not repeat themselves year after year. So let's not make it a static exercise, but rather a dynamic exercise. And I believe that the CHU can be of great help here. These were the comments I wanted to share, Arman.
Jean-Pierre, thanks for this commentary and consolidation of the views, including the CHU, which is also important for audiences. They are, majority of them are leaders of the CHUs in 20+ countries who connected today. And for today's closing, I would like just to pass the floor to Miora Diaconescu, who is Department Director of CHU from Ministry of Finance, Romania, and IACOP Executive Committee member and Audit in Practice Working Group leader. Miora brings 25 years experience in the public administration, including 11 years in internal audit. She is also involved in many technical assistance programs of EU and a member of the European Commission Public Internal Control Working Group. Miora, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Arman. Dear speakers, dear colleagues, friends, we are at the end of the second meeting in this virtual online format. I hope you are now more familiar with this platform, and the virtual format allows you to continue receiving the key information from our experienced speakers. PEMPAL IACOP identify topics which are of interest to you to effectively implement your important function. I consider this meeting a special one because we had an opportunity to learn from each other to improve the existing KPIs in our department, in our administration, to see other perspective and experience in this area. The KPI subject is a challenging one for internal audit activity. KPIs for internal audit activity highlight the importance of establishing performance measures sufficient to determine if internal audit is meeting its goals and effectively demonstrate value to an organization. It is imperative that performance measures include not only quantitative criteria, but qualitative criteria as well. We noticed that it's possible to have both annual and also midterm KPIs. We need reliable, accessible source of information in order to measure our KPIs. How important is to have good objectives, smart objectives to establish baseline and targets. There were many practical examples of KPIs discussed today. We need 2 indicators to provide an accurate and balanced summary of the effectiveness of internal audit department, the results of quality assessment and maturity level. We discussed about the main challenges regarding the establishment of KPIs, how difficult it is to have good KPIs, measurable KPIs. We learned from European Commission, UK, Austria about their experience in the system of KPIs. I hope that all our discussion were interesting and important for your future action in order to establish your own KPIs for internal audit activity. I would like to thank to our speakers for their time and effort to share their experience with us. I would like to thank to all the speakers for very useful presentation. I would also like to thank our interpreters. I know they are online, and to our support team for their dedicated and professional translation and support. You know, if we were in normal conditions, we would now upload the interpreters and our colleagues from PEMPAL Secretariat. Please, the interpreters and colleagues from Secretariat receive our applause and thanks. One point I would like to add, after this meeting, you will receive our electronic feedback survey regarding this session. We would appreciate your feedback. Such feedback is extremely important as it will help to enhance similar events in the future. Finally, I would like to tell you that we will continue to support you. PEMPAL IACOP will continue to organize virtual meetings until the international condition will allow meetings face-to-face. Stay healthy and see you on our next meeting organized by PEMPAL IACOP. Thank you very much for your attention and participation.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks to the speakers and to participants. Stay safe and see you soon to our next seat. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you very much.
Bye. Thank you. Stay safe.